Francis Currey of Selkirk, and he was awarded the medal at the age of 19 for saving the lives of 5 of his fellow soldiers.
People don't realize how thin close we come to lose in that war.
The frozen Ardennes forest, December 1944. Hitler's last great offensive has shattered American lines, unleashing chaos and terror. For the Americans, the cost would be staggering. 89,000 casualties, with over 19,000 killed. Each number a story of frozen sacrifice. Yet amid the snow and desperation stands a figure that defies all expectation. Not a grizzled veteran, but a 19-year-old orphan named Francis Sherman Currey. With ice in his veins and improvised weapons in his hands, he steps into the fire. What happens next isn't just heroism. It's a one-man Armageddon so devastating that it would etch his name into history as perhaps the single most frightening soldier of World War II. What made Francis Sherman Currey the scariest soldier of World War II? Let's find out. The war was supposed to be over by Christmas. That's what they had told themselves, what they dared to believe. After the hell of the D-Day landings and the brutal push through France, the weary Allied soldiers thought they could see the finish line. The German army, they were told, was broken, retreating, scrambling to defend its own borders. A last hard push in the spring, and it would be done. They were wrong. In the early morning of December 16, 1944, the war came screaming back to life, not with a whimper, but with an earth-shattering roar. The quiet, snow-draped Ardennes forest, a place deemed so peaceful it was where green American units were sent to rest, suddenly vanished in a storm of fire and steel. This was Hitler's last, desperate gamble. A massive, secret counteroffensive. His goal was bold: to slice through the American lines, recapture the vital port of Antwerp, and split the Allied armies in two.
While the Allies wait, Hitler assesses how to respond.
He dreamed of forcing a negotiated peace, of turning the tide of a war he was surely losing. To do it, he threw everything he had left. 250,000 battle-hardened German soldiers, hundreds of tanks, including the terrifying new King Tigers, monsters of armor that seemed invincible. They fell upon a thin, surprised American front. For the GIs holding the line, it was a waking nightmare. The cold was a physical enemy, a brutal sub-zero cold that froze blood in wounds and made metal burn to the touch. Then came the enemy they could see, ghostly figures in white camouflage emerging from the thick fog and relentless snow. The air hummed with the sound of incoming shells and the terrifying, distinct grind of German panzer tanks. The American lines weren't just bending, they were shattering. Units were cut off, surrounded, and overwhelmed.
Within just 6 hours of the operation commencing, the survivors were in full retreat.
Communication failed. Confusion reigned. In a field near Malmedy, German SS troops machine-gunned dozens of unarmed American prisoners of war, an atrocity that sent a chilling message. There would be no mercy. This was a fight for survival. Against this apocalyptic backdrop, this bulge in the map where the German army was punching through, stood a handful of cold, scared, and incredibly young American soldiers. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and shrouded in a thick fog of doubt. They were boys from farms in Iowa and streets in New York, now asked to stand against the best of what was left of the German war machine. And in the middle of it all was a 19-year-old orphan from Hurleyville, New York, named Francis Sherman Currey. He was a replacement soldier, a kid who had been trained on every weapon he could get his hands on. He was just one boy in a vast, chaotic battle that would become the bloodiest single conflict ever fought by the U.S. Army.
From World War II, lives here in the capital region. He is Sergeant Francis Currey of Selkirk, and he was awarded the medal.
But in the next few hours, in one small Belgian town, this one teenager would stop being just a soldier. He would become a whirlwind, a one-man army. And for the Germans advancing on Malmedy, he would become their worst nightmare. Before he was a hero, Francis Currey was just a boy who knew too much about loss. Growing up in the small, tight-knit community of Hurleyville, New York, his world was shattered early. His father died when he was 5. His mother passed away when he was just 12, leaving him an orphan in 1937. The foster care system became his home, A young life already marked by a hardness that many of his future comrades could scarcely imagine. Why, it was this tough beginning that may have forged the unshakable soldier to come. When the U.S. Army offered a lifeline in the form of the Army Specialized Training Program, ASTP, for bright high school students, the 17-year-old Currey seized it. He passed the exam, seeing it not just as a duty, but as an opportunity. He enlisted just before his 18th birthday in June 1943, a strategic move to avoid being simply drafted into an unknown role. He wanted control over his destiny. His destiny, for a time, was Fort Benning, Georgia. Here, the raw kid from Hurleyville was molded into a soldier. The ASTP was intense. Its goal was to fast-track smart young men into becoming officers. Currey was a natural. He absorbed the training like a sponge, as he would later say. He learned to fire every weapon they put in his hands, not just the rifles he'd known from hunting, but the heavy, powerful tools of modern warfare: machine guns, bazookas, mortars. He was a quick study, precise, and calm under pressure. But the Army, in its infinite and often baffling wisdom, decided the teenage orphan was too immature for a commission. The needs of the war were changing. With the D-Day invasion looming, the massive machine needed riflemen, not student engineers. So his path was rerouted. He was sent to the 75th Infantry Division, thrust into the grueling Louisiana maneuvers, and handed a Browning automatic rifle, BAR. The BAR was a beast, a 20-pound automatic rifle that was a squad's primary source of firepower. It was a weapon for a strong, steady man. Currey, still a teenager, became an expert with it. There was one final, almost cruel delay. President Roosevelt had decreed that no soldier could be sent overseas until they were 19. So Currey trained, and he waited. He turned 19 on June 29, 1944, weeks after the beaches of Normandy had been stormed. The Allies were now bleeding men in the treacherous hedgerows of France, and replacements were urgently needed. The boy was finally ready for the war. His arrival in Europe was surreal. He landed on Omaha Beach months after D-Day, but the grim evidence of the invasion was still everywhere. He was shuttled through replacement depots, moving closer and closer to the sound of the guns. He was assigned to the battle-hardened 30th Infantry Division, known as Old Hickory, and famous for its toughness. For a short while, he saw Europe almost like a tourist, even riding a truck through the recently liberated Paris. The tourism ended abruptly when he reached his company in the Netherlands. The reality of his situation hit him with the force of a German shell. He and two other replacements, one a young sergeant, the others privates, reported to their new company commander. The sergeant, trying to show initiative, asked if the three friends could serve together in the same squad. The company commander's reply was a blunt lesson in the arithmetic of war. "I lost a whole squad today," he said flatly. The three new men just looked at each other, the terrifying weight of those words sinking in. They weren't joining a unit, they were filling holes. Currey's war began in earnest. He fought through the hell of the Siegfried Line, a deep network of German fortifications, pillboxes, and fortified towns. It was a brutal month of fighting to reach the banks of the Roer River.
They also set up their defenses outside the city.
Just as they prepared to cross, the Germans, in a move of tactical spite, opened the floodgates of upstream dams, turning the entire valley into an impassable, freezing lake. Stalled and exhausted, the men of the 30th Division thought they might get a moment's rest. They were wrong. In mid-December, the ground shook not from their own artillery, but from a massive offensive to the south. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. Almost overnight, the entire 30th Division was ripped from its positions and thrown into trucks. They raced south through icy roads toward a small Belgian town called Malmedy. They were going in to stop the German spearhead. Francis Currey, the orphan from Hurleyville, was now a hardened BAR gunner headed straight for the eye of the storm. He was scared, cold, and surrounded by the chaos of a collapsing front. He was exactly where he was meant to be. The stage was set for a single hour of unimaginable violence that would define his life. The whirlwind was about to be unleashed. Dawn on December 21st offered no comfort, just a gray, freezing light over the shattered town of Malmedy. Francis Currey and his squad were huddled in a factory building, their breath misting in the air, their world reduced to the crunch of frozen snow and the distant, ominous growl of Panzer engines. They were surrounded, cut off, and the enemy was closing in. The first monster emerged from the tree line, a German tank, its cannon sweeping towards them. Inside that building, 5 of Currey's comrades were pinned down, their position about to become a tomb. This was the moment. The 19-year-old orphan, with nothing left to lose, made a decision that would tear a hole in the German assault. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed a bazooka, a weapon that felt puny against the advancing steel beast. He burst out into the open, the cold biting his face, and ran for better cover. He had one shot. He dropped to a knee, the rocket launcher heavy on his shoulder. He wasn't aiming for the tank's thick frontal armor. That would be a futile effort. He aimed for a seam, the delicate joint where the turret met the body. He fired. The rocket screamed across the street and struck true. With a metallic shriek, the tank's turret jammed. It was blinded, crippled, and utterly neutralized. The first giant had fallen, but another tank was right behind it. Currey didn't stop. He spotted an abandoned American half-track, a wrecked vehicle that now served as an arsenal. He scrambled to it with his numb hands. Inside, he found a cache of anti-tank grenades. He loaded one into the launcher. He fired. The explosion rocked the second tank, not destroying it, but shocking its crew. The hatches flew open, and the Germans scrambled out, fleeing their smoking vehicle in terror. He did it again, and then again. A third and a fourth tank were forced to halt, their crews disoriented and fleeing under the relentless assault from this single, seemingly unstoppable soldier. In mere minutes, with scavenged weapons and breathtaking audacity, Currey had single-handedly blunted the armored spearhead of the attack. Now the German infantry came, swarming forward without their tank support. Currey saw them advancing across the open ground. He dropped the bazooka and the grenades. He found a machine gun amongst the wreckage, its cold, familiar metal a comfort in his hands. He laid down a storm of fire, mowing down the advancing troops, cutting them down before they could get close to his building, to his friends. He was everywhere at once, a blur of motion in the snow. A bazookaman, a grenadier, a machine gunner. The gunfire was a constant, deafening roar. From his position, Currey could see it clearly. 5 of his buddies were trapped inside a small building across the street. German tanks and machine guns had them completely surrounded, pinning them down. Every door, every window was covered by enemy fire. To step outside was to die. They were stuck, and it was only a matter of time before a tank shell found its mark. He knew he couldn't fight all of them. There was no way he could win the battle alone. But he could do one thing. He could get his friends out. Ignoring the bullets snapping past his head, Currey started to move. He didn't charge straight at them. That would have been Instead, he used what he had. He laid down a storm of covering fire with his automatic rifle.
The PAR, 80 shots a minute.
Not to hit anyone, but to make the enemy duck for cover, to force them to hesitate for just a few precious seconds. In those brief moments of quiet he created, he nailed. He guided them, showing them the path, the small pockets of safety between the explosions. One by one, they made their move. It wasn't a heroic movie-style sprint. It was a desperate, scrambling crawl through the snow and rubble. They ran when they could, ducked when they had to, their hearts pounding in their chests. The entire time, Currey was their shield. He kept firing, drawing the enemy's attention towards himself and away from their escape. He didn't stop until the last man had stumbled out of that death trap and into the relative safety of the American lines. He stayed until the job was done. He didn't carry anyone. He didn't perform a miracle. He simply created a chance, a tiny window of opportunity, and his friends seized it. In the middle of all that chaos and fear, he saw a problem, and he fixed it. That's what real heroism looks like. It's not about being fearless. It's about making sure the men next to you get to go home. What Francis Currey did on that frozen day was more than just heroic. It was psychologically devastating. He didn't just fight the German soldiers, he broke their spirit. He became, in every sense, their worst nightmare, and his true weapon was fear. First, he was utterly unpredictable. In a war fought by rulebooks, Currey rewrote the rules on the fly. Soldiers are trained to understand a battle. The enemy is here, using this weapon. But Currey was everywhere. 1 second, he was a bazooka man disabling a tank. Next, he was a machine gunner mowing down infantry. Then, he was a grenadier forcing crews to abandon their vehicles. He was a blur of constant, shocking motion. For the German troops, this was deeply confusing and terrifying. They weren't facing a unit. They were fighting a single, unstoppable phantom who seemed to possess every weapon and be in every place at once. This confusion creates a helpless feeling. How do you fight an enemy you cannot predict or understand? You can't. It shatters your confidence and makes you hesitate. And in battle, hesitation can mean death. Second, his actions had a massive symbolic impact. A tank is not just a machine. It is a symbol of unstoppable power and technological might. It's the spearhead of an assault, a rolling fortress meant to crush hope and defenses alike. For a single infantryman to take one on was supposed to be a suicide mission. Yet Currey didn't just engage one tank. He systematically dismantled an entire armored push. When he jammed that first tank's turret with a perfectly aimed bazooka shot, he did something profound. He showed every German soldier watching that their greatest weapon was vulnerable, that their invincible machine could be humbled by one determined man with a rocket. It was a colossal blow to their morale. The momentum of their attack didn't just stall, it evaporated. The symbolism was clear. If this one American soldier could do this, what chance did they have? Finally, Currey waged a brutal form of economic warfare. In war, everything has a cost.
Our pilots had scored the greatest aerial victory in the history of naval warfare.
Especially tanks and trained soldiers. They are expensive, limited resources that cannot be easily replaced. By disabling multiple tanks and inflicting heavy casualties on the infantry, Currey wasn't just winning a skirmish, he was bankrupting the German effort on that part of the front. Every tank he forced to be abandoned was a huge financial and logistical loss. Every soldier he cut down was a man who would not fight another day.
Blitzkrieg forces has been unleashed against the Soviet Union on a 2,000-mile front.
He stretched their resources to the breaking point. The German command depended on a swift, powerful thrust. Currey's one-man stand made that thrust too costly to continue. He didn't just defeat them in battle, he made their entire mission too expensive to afford. Currey's combat skill was not born from chance. It was forged in steady training, hard practice, and clear-headed use of every weapon at his disposal. What set Currey apart was a mix of textbook proficiency and quick improvisation, the kind that turns standard-issue gear into life-saving tools. From early infantry drills, he learned the basics every soldier needed: solid marksmanship, fast reloading, rifle maintenance, and calm under fire. That foundation made his rifle a reliable partner. He knew how to aim from cover, how to make short, accurate bursts, and how to move while keeping his sights on the enemy. Those skills meant Currey could deliver steady fire when other men hesitated. Equally important was his training with anti-armor weapons. Currey gained hands-on experience with the shoulder-fired rocket launcher, the bazooka, learning its firing angles, backblast safety, and the best ways to approach enemy armor. He combined that knowledge with a keen eye for weak points: rear engine compartments, tracks, and observation hatches. The result was aggressive but calculated, closing within effective range and firing with the confidence that practice brings. Currey's comfort with grenades and small explosives came from constant repetition. Throwing a live grenade under combat stress takes muscle memory. He practiced arming, throwing, and taking cover until the motions were automatic. That training let him use grenades to clear positions or disable lighter vehicles without hesitation. He also mastered entrenching and fieldcraft. Currey knew how to set up effective firing positions, use natural terrain for concealment, and rig quick obstacles to slow an enemy advance. Working with machine guns and automatic weapons, he learned how to synchronize suppressive fire so teammates could move or retreat safely. Where training and reality met was in Currey's ability to improvise. He translated classroom lessons into real-time problem solving. removing rounds from jammed weapons under pressure, using enemy weapons when his own ran dry, and combining rifle and rocket attacks to force opponents out of cover. That creativity came from deep familiarity with each tool's strengths and limits. At the Battle of the Bulge, those skills mattered in life-or-death ways. Under heavy fire, he used accurate rifle shots to keep the enemy's heads down, then switched to anti-armor rounds to halt armored advances. He moved deliberately between firing points, coordinating with comrades and choosing shots that would protect trapped buddies. When structures and streets became chaotic, his grenade and close-quarters skills let him clear rooms and cut off enemy movement. Training gave him speed, but practice also gave him judgment. He knew when to conserve ammo, when to expose himself for a key shot, and when to combine weapons to create an opening. That mix of disciplined technique and quick thinking turned standard weapons into decisive tools and helped save lives during one of World War II's fiercest fights. Francis Currey's one-hour stand in Malmedy wasn't just a story of personal bravery. It was a stone thrown into a calm pond, and the ripples spread across the entire battlefield, changing its course. The immediate effect was tactical. The German attack on that key sector of Malmedy stalled. By single-handedly destroying their armored push and cutting down their infantry, Currey broke the momentum of the assault. He gave his unit, and the entire 30th Division's flank, a chance to breathe and regroup. In a battle that was hanging by a thread, this was everything. If the Germans had broken through that point, they could have rolled up the American line from the side, creating chaos and potentially splitting forces. Currey's actions prevented that. He was a plug in a dam, and he held. This wasn't just about one street, it was about cohesion. The Allied defense during the Bulge was a fragile thing, a patchwork of desperate units holding the line. Every breakthrough threatened to unravel the entire front. By stopping the Germans cold at his position, Currey helped maintain that fragile unity. He allowed the broader Allied strategy to work, giving other units the time they needed to reinforce and counterattack. The impact of this was so profound that it reached the very top. Years later, a story began to circulate. It was said that General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme commander of Allied forces in Europe, was once asked about the bravest thing he had ever seen in the war. He didn't describe a large battle or a famous general. He instead pointed to the file of a teenage sergeant from New York. Eisenhower allegedly claimed that the actions of Francis Currey that day had shortened the war by 6 weeks. Whether the quote is perfectly accurate or more of a legend isn't the point. The sentiment behind it is what matters. It captures a profound truth, that the immense, history-altering effort of millions can sometimes be pivoted by the courage of one. Currey's stand saved lives in that moment, but it also may have saved countless more by helping to bring the brutal war to a quicker end. He was proof that a single act of courage can change the world. After the guns fell silent and the world celebrated, Francis Currey did something extraordinary. He went home. There were no victory parades for him, no seeking of the spotlight. The teenager who had faced down a German armored division simply hung up his uniform and got a job as a counselor at the Veterans Affairs Hospital in Albany, New York. For over 3 decades, that's where he worked. Not as a war hero, but as a quiet man helping other veterans navigate the same system he had returned to. He understood their pain, their silence, their memories. He listened to their stories, and he rarely, if ever, offered his own. That wasn't his way. This was the defining quality of Francis Currey, his profound humility. He never saw himself as the legend everyone else did. When asked about that day in Malmedy, he would shrug off the praise. "I was just doing my job," he'd say. Anybody would have done it. He believed that the real heroes were the men who didn't come home. He wore the Medal of Honor, but he never let it wear him. It was a part of his history, not his entire identity. His commitment to his brothers in arms never wavered. He was a lifelong member of the American Legion and the veterans of foreign wars, not for the camaraderie, but for the chance to serve others. He fought for veterans' benefits and spoke up for those who felt forgotten. His mission had simply changed. He was still protecting his fellow soldiers, just in a different way. Perhaps the most surprising chapter of his legacy is one he likely never expected. In the 1990s, the makers of the G.I. Joe action line created a special Medal of Honor series. They needed real heroes to model them after. They chose Francis Currey. It's a striking image, a boy's toy, a symbol of play-acting war, created in the likeness of a man who had lived its most real and terrifying horrors. There is a beautiful irony in it. The man who never sought fame became an icon for children playing soldiers in their backyards. It ensured that his story, his likeness, and his quiet bravery would be passed down to a new generation in the most unexpected of ways. Francis Currey passed away in 2019. His legacy is a lesson in true character. He proved that valor isn't just about one moment of incredible courage on a battlefield. It's also about a lifetime of quiet decency, humility, and service to others after the war is won. He was, and remains, the scariest soldier and the gentlest of men. The medals Francis Currey received tell a story, not just of one incredible day, but of a soldier's entire journey through the war. They are a tangible record of courage, sacrifice, and service. At the top sits the Medal of Honor. This wasn't just a medal, it was the nation's highest recognition for valor, awarded for his single hour of unimaginable bravery in Malmedy. The citation details the impossible: disabling a tank with a bazooka, forcing back others, mowing down infantry, and saving his friends. It is the official proof of a day when one man's will changed the course of a battle. But his courage wasn't confined to one day. The Silver Star and Bronze Star were awarded for other acts of gallantry and meritorious service in combat. These medals speak to a consistent pattern of bravery, the kind shown day in and day out by a soldier who repeatedly risked everything for his unit. The Purple Heart tells a quieter, darker story. It was awarded for wounds received in action. This medal is a reminder that his service came at a personal physical cost, that he shed blood and endured pain in the defense of his country. The 3 battle stars on his campaign ribbon are like a map of the war. Each star represents a major campaign he fought in, a chapter of the conflict he endured from Normandy to the Bulge. They mark the long, grueling road he traveled. His distinguished unit badge is crucial. It signifies that his entire outfit was cited for extraordinary heroism. He always saw himself as part of a team, and this badge honors the collective bravery of the men who fought beside him. The honors didn't stop at America's border. Belgium awarded him the Order of Leopold, their highest national honor. This meant that the country he helped liberate recognized his sacrifice decades later, a profound thank you from a grateful nation. Finally, his 2006 induction into the New York State Senate Veterans Hall of Fame brought his story home. It ensured that the boy from Hurleyville would be remembered in the state he called home, not just as a soldier, but as a legend. Together, these awards are more than just ribbons and medal. They are the full picture of a hero, his single finest hour, his consistent bravery, his sacrifice, his long service, and the gratitude of 2 nations. What makes a soldier truly terrifying? It isn't just strength or skill. The most frightening warrior is the one who shatters every expectation, who operates outside the known rules of battle, becoming an unpredictable and unstoppable force. Francis Currey wasn't just a hero. He was the embodiment of the ultimate World War II fear, a nightmare made real for the German army in those frozen Ardennes woods. His power sprang from a terrifying contradiction, a youthful inferno. He was not a grizzled, hardened veteran. He was a teenager. To the enemy, he must have seemed like a boy, yet he wielded destruction with the cold, precise efficiency of a master. This was not the calculated rage of a grown man. It was the focused intensity of a youth who saw a problem. His friends were about to die, and solved it with terrifying directness. A seasoned soldier might have calculated the odds and hesitated. Currey, with the moral clarity of a young man who knew right from wrong, simply acted. This combination of youthful energy and lethal precision was deeply unnerving. His methods defined improvisational brilliance. He didn't arrive on the field with specialized elite weaponry. He used what was there: a discarded bazooka, a forgotten machine gun, anti-tank grenades on an abandoned half-track. He turned the debris of war into tools of salvation and chaos. This was the opposite of how a conventional army fights. For the Germans, it meant there was no logic to counter. You couldn't predict his arsenal because it was whatever he could find. He was a master of the battlefield's chaos, and that made him impossible to plan against. And at the heart of it all was his moral clarity. Currey was not an aggressor, he was a defender. His entire devastating campaign was launched for one simple reason: to save his friends. This defensive stance made his actions all the more fearsome. He was not a predator hunting for kills, he was a guardian unleashing absolute vengeance on those who threatened his own. To his allies, he was an angel of protection. To the Germans, he was a phantom of retribution, appearing from the smoke to defend his ground with a relentlessness that felt biblical. This is what set him apart from the stereotypical elite soldier. The terror of a sniper is their distance and silence. The fear of a commando is their planned, stealthy precision. Currey's terror was the opposite. It was close quarters, loud, improvisational, and relentless. His adaptability was his weapon. He was not a single tool, but an entire toolbox, and he used every implement at hand until the job was done. His Medal of Honor citation underscores this, emphasizing his repeated braving of murderous fire. The keyword is repeated. It wasn't one brave charge, it was a sustained, relentless series of actions. He kept going back into the fire. This relentless presence is what truly breaks an enemy's spirit. In the end, Francis Currey's story is a powerful testament to how the course of history can be altered by the raw courage of a single individual. He was an unlikely reaper, a modest orphan turned savior, a boy who held the line. He proved that valor isn't always about grand strategies or elite training. Sometimes it's about one person, armed with nothing but courage and a willingness to act, who steps into the breach and changes everything.